So, welcome back, everyone. Let's continue talking about trauma. So, have you ever wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, no matter how hard you try to change? That there is just something in your life that keeps blocking you at every turn and you can't put your finger on it? Just think for a moment about these questions. And unresolved trauma stuck in the energy field can be the silent saboteur undermining our efforts really to move forward. And today we will shine a light on these hidden saboteurs and learn how to address them head on. And if you haven't yet, we highly encourage you to listen to those last 2 live talks we have done. And also today you will learn a technique to deal with trauma. And the repercussions of unresolved trauma on adults can be severe and enduring, and unresolved trauma acts as a silent saboteur in our life.
So let's actually talk about what if recovery actually fails? What if you can't get past the trauma or it just won't quite heal? And by this, we kind of mean that trauma treatments really so far have failed. You know, you might have gone and seen a therapist, and so on, and medications. And most commonly, the fact that a person doesn't heal is because they end up repressing the trauma completely, and also because it remains in the energy system. And so many trauma victims, they require time for healing. We all know this. And the victims may have experienced, significant physical and emotional trauma. And if you think about it, emotional wounds, they can't really be healed like physical wounds. Some of them might heal quicker than others, but it's still going to take several days, if not weeks. And a lot of times it can take even years for that trauma wound to even scab over and finally even start healing in the first place. So if the trauma lasts more than a month, or the repercussions of it, various different scenarios can possibly arise.
Yeah, and the first scenario is the fact that long-term trauma can be a distressing state of being, exacerbated by a perceived absence of power, to change anything. And we simply feel so powerless. And this leads to long-term stress. And let's take feeling stuck in an emotional abusive marriage. You feel stuck, trauma continues to compound with verbal abuse, and ultimately you end up living in a permanent state of stress, which we all know is not healthy for us. And long-term stress and long-term trauma can physiologically lead to high blood pressure, to heart disease, to a suppressed immune system and increased inflammation, to sleep disorders, and so much more. And within our relationships, long-term trauma and stress can, for example, lead to a breakdown in communication due to a possible increase in irritability. And we can become withdrawn and show a decrease in empathy, have more frequent arguments revolving around blame and resentment. And long-term trauma and stress can also lead to reduced intimacy in partnerships, physically and emotionally, since the trauma and stress consume all the available energy, and we end up neglecting our relationships and unfortunately isolating ourselves even more. And it can even impact how we parent and model behaviors to our children. And our trauma and stress get picked up by kids and becomes their own stress and trauma. And as you can see, it has a ton of impact in all the aspects of your life. And we are literally sabotaging our own relationships and goals in life.
So then the second scenario that can happen is the abrupt recollections of a trauma. And those are what we know for, nightmares and flashbacks. And when scenes from that traumatic event eventually kind of just repeat themselves like in a horror movie. And sometimes it's, fragments of smells, of sounds, or of psychological sensations that just kind of appear. Um, and even though it's just a flashback, they are really still very jarring and can put us back into that experience of the trauma. We might just be sitting on a bench on the road eating an ice cream cone that we just got, and we're just kind of watching pedestrians go by, for example, and then we suddenly notice a tall person walking by that has some, similar features to the person that just consistently bullies us at work, and it triggers a flashback right back into that scenario. And then for me personally, I would have flashbacks about the ambulance ride to the hospital and the desperation that I felt, and how the nurses and doctors were not listening to me. I was able to heal the traumas with all the tools we cover in our trauma workshop, but it was definitely not fun. And then the third scenario is avoidance of anything that might remind us of the trauma. So fearful avoidance may become increasingly common. We just avoid more and more and more. And this can be, for example, that we end up refusing to use trains or streetcars, or not wanting to talk about transportation in general if, you were in a car accident that just traumatized you. And the more we suppress our trauma, the more often it is likely that flashbacks often do pop up, and that most of the time at the worst time possible. So we really have to face our traumas instead of stuffing them down.
Yeah, that's so true, Sarah. And the last scenario of unresolved trauma is a serious case of increased jitteriness. So trauma victims are often unable to sleep and flinch at every unknown and unexpected noise or event, and their life-sustaining autonomic nervous system is always on alert, and it's running like a full-speed engine without actually moving anywhere. So just picture your car in park and you are continuously gunning the engine, trying to move. Not good for the car, right? And we are eventually going to wear out some part of the engine or flood it. And that's how our nervous system is. Everything becomes a danger because we are constantly in the I am not safe state. But eventually we crash, usually with a mental break or health breakdown. So in general, the limbic system is active the majority of the time if the trauma remains active past 1 month. And the limbic system is responsible for a person's emotions and can be considered the emotional nervous system. And the limbic system is a complex set of brain structures primarily responsible for emotions, behaviors, motivations, and long-term memory. And it regulates various psychological functions, including fight or flight responses, emotional responses to stimuli, and forming memories associated with emotions. And additionally, the limbic system plays a crucial role in reward processing, so influencing behaviors related to survival and pleasure, such as eating, drinking, and sexual activity.
So if you are constantly active, or your limbic system, just remains constantly active, that is actually a coping technique that we kind of have designed to keep us safe in that phase of just constant, persistent adversity. It's essentially a feeling of being always in survival mode, or always kind of just on edge. And over time, it becomes the new normal for our brain and our body, which isn't really healthy. In our nervous system's physical condition of always being on high alert at all times can then have, lasting impacts on our thoughts, on our actions, on our relationships. And we can end up with more intrusive thoughts like persistent worry and negative thinking. We may have memory problems, have a hard time concentrating, and we end up kind of prioritizing stress over relationships. And that kind of represents itself in hypervigilance, where we literally filter, every single word that someone has told us during a conversation and analyze what we said to see if we could have done it better, if we messed up, if we think the person reacted poorly, and so on and so forth. And a last example you want to provide is just also the presence of, for example, increased conflict. If trauma has you in that grip, right, and you're constantly on high alert, your relationship will probably suffer under increased conflicts. And it's not just with your partner, but with friends as well. We're more irritable, more impulsive, and we end up resenting our partners, and we blame them for failing us. And at the same time, if you flip it, our partners and friends, they may become frustrated and also resentful with our behavior, right? So what do? I mean, trauma's got us good, right? We're in a constant high state alert. What do? How do we manage? And so managing trauma essentially involves a combination of self-care practices, therapeutic techniques, and supportive interventions. Okay, so let's talk about some different ways to manage trauma and a technique or two that you can teach yourself and learn, and then you can also even teach to others.
Yeah, and before we jump in, let's talk about energy work. So when we talk about energy work, we are speaking of the aspect of our body system that most of us can't see. All of us have an energy field around our physical body that is known as the aura. And this has been supported by scientific findings who have measured the energy frequency output coming from the palms, for example, when setting different intentions such as love or anger. And we all generate an electromagnetic field. And all living beings, in fact, do so. So the ideal health state for the aura is centered around the physical body, free of holes, tears, and so on. And within this energy field, trauma can become stuck. And trauma can get stuck in the energy field. And energy work works with the principle that first we have something in our energy field, and then it represents itself as a physical or mental alignment, such as anxiety, lower back pain, headaches, and so on and so on.
So then, what can trauma cause in that energy field that we just talked about, that aura around us? It can create a shift. It can lead to weak spots where they have areas where they're weak or thin, which also makes us more susceptible to, more negative influences. And then trauma can also literally create blockages in the flow of the energy within the aura, which then disrupts that natural flow and that natural balance of life force energy that we have in our system. And that, if that's blocked or disrupted, it, leads to tiredness, to fatigue, and so much more. And the negative emotions that we have associated with traumatic events, they can also leave a residue in the aura and can lead to kind of feelings of just being bogged down, feeling heavy, sad, and anxious. And those can persist for a very long time after the event. We're just naming a few things here. We could probably do a whole class on it by itself, on how it affects the energy field. But what we want to say is that energy work is key. It can truly be that missing puzzle piece on the path of your healing. If you don't clear the trauma out of your energy field, recovery may fail. It may not, but it may, and we may continue to struggle consistently and persistently to kind of overcome, heal, and release the traumas completely, because it constantly reverberates back into your energy system. And if it's in your energy field, it will create physical symptoms eventually again. Okay, so let's actually talk about different ways to manage trauma along with the techniques.
So let's start with a great grounding technique that can also be extremely helpful to utilize if you are experiencing repercussions of trauma and a constantly high alert nervous system. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And here we identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste to stay grounded. So let's do it together. And also feel free to share your responses. All right, take a deep breath. And then find 5 things you can see. 4 things you can touch. Great. Now 3 things you can hear. Awesome. And now 2 things you can smell. And lastly, 1 thing you can taste. How do you feel now? Hopefully a bit more grounded and safer in your body and your surroundings. So safe place visualization is key when you are managing trauma. It is a great practice to create a safe place in your mind. And this could be a memory, a location, or an imaginary place that provides you with feelings of safety and peace.
And then other techniques you can use, for example, are guided meditations that kind of promote, relaxation and self-healing. And then, of course, mindfulness practice, where you focus and you breathe in the present moment. And then also regular physical activity, walking, yoga, swimming. They're really, really great ways to get moving and reduce your stress and improve mood. And there's even actually trauma-informed yoga practices that you can find online and probably also near you to assist you. We have posted a bunch of different guided meditations and also mindful practices in the group or on our YouTube channel, which you can find under Heal, Empower, Love. And you can look around there as well if you're so inclined.
Yeah, and also for some creative expression through art therapy and journaling or writing a blog can be extremely therapeutic. And another great way to manage anxiety, trauma, and stress feelings is the use of relaxation techniques. You can use conscious muscle relaxation, where you systematically tense and intentionally relax different muscle groups in your body. And something that is extremely important in the whole experience is self-compassion. Talk to yourself gently, soothe yourself, become a partner and team up with yourself instead of working against yourself, and forgive yourself for having had this traumatic experience, however big or small it was. And giving yourself grace in addition to a balanced diet and good sleep habits can go a long way. And I know that I constantly ended up talking to myself during the process, of resolving my mom's apartment and placing her in a nursing home. And I had to cheer myself on and gently give myself grace. And at night, I literally would lay down and start at my feet, telling each body part, thank you, tensing it, and then intentionally relaxing it. And that really provided me with much better sleep than I even hoped for.
And then last, we do want to ensure and make sure that, you understand that professional help is also super, super helpful. Okay. And we really like to combine our care that we provide with, trained mental health care professionals, because I think that they go hand in hand. There are so many trained therapists that are trauma focused, such as, EMDR, the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or the TFCBT, where you have the trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And, sometimes medication may need to be necessary to manage the symptoms until you can kind of get on top of it all and work your way through it and get yourself out of the hole you might be in because of trauma. But incorporating your therapy and combining and joining it with energy therapy, I think that's kind of like should be the golden standard. You can start, when you start doing that, you really have a truly comprehensive approach to managing trauma for yourself and for others. And so, kind of just as a recap, today we explored, the impacts of unresolved trauma and how it can kind of sabotage our lives. And that leads to long-term stress, flashbacks, and avoidance behaviors. And then we also discussed the importance of just recognizing, the effects and managing them through some self-care practices and also professional help. And then we also introduced the benefits of energy therapy, grounding techniques, and some other methods that can help kind of ease the burdens of trauma. There are truly just so many wonderful techniques and ways to assist our nervous system. And we're going to cover that tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will have a recommendation for an entirely different approach to trauma that you likely have never heard of. So just be sure to listen in and join us. And, we can also only recommend our Untrauma workshop to you for some awesome techniques and tools. And again, thank you for being here with us. We appreciate you. Please leave a comment or any questions that you have, and we will get back to you. And if not, then we will see you tomorrow. Bye.